Welcome to Learn This Game, where you can learn about board games and how they are played. Today, we'll be looking at Congo Merc. In this video, there'll be an overview and description of the game. We'll inventory the components, and we'll review the rulebook and scenario rules. We'll go through gameplay including setup, sample turns, and victory conditions. Lastly, we'll review any accessories you may find helpful for this game. In the description, there will be some helpful links. There'll also be a timestamp index so you can navigate directly to any part of the presentation. If you want to skip this introduction and go straight to the game setup and gameplay, you can go to the timestamp index now. And if you find this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. You can also leave a comment to let us know what game you would like Learn This Game to review next. Congo Merc is published by Decision Games and was designed by Joseph Miranda. In this solitaire game, you'll be leading mercenary commandos on daring missions in the Congo during 1964 to 1965. Congo Merc was first published in 2012. The publisher link will be in the description so you can verify the current availability of the game. This is a physically small game measuring 9 inches high by 6 inches wide, and it comes in a plastic bag. An app is not required and there is no app assistance. However, there is a standalone version now available on Steam. The link will be in the description. An age recommendation was not provided, but anyone 14 and older should have no problem playing the game. It has been described by the publisher as very low complexity, and each mission should take no longer than 1 hour to play. The game is designed for solitaire play only. It is competitive since you will be fighting against enemy forces to achieve your objectives. There are no expansions, but Congo Merc is part of a series of games known as the Commando series. They are all solitaire games in which the player must lead covert missions to accomplish objectives and disrupt the enemy. If you like Congo Merc, you can check out Learn This Game's video about Long Range Desert Group, which is another game in the Commando series. The link will be in the description. Game designer Joseph Miranda has many design credits to his name, including Zulus on the Ramparts and Empires in America. An internet search will help you locate many more games by this designer. If you want to explore other games set in Africa, you can check out these other entries. Modern War is a military history magazine that includes war games on various topics. You can also search the internet with keywords Congo, Algeria, Angola, Mogadishu, mercenaries in Africa, and African civil wars. You can also check out these books about mercenaries in Africa and the history of the Congo. Now that you've seen a brief description of the game, let's get into the game itself. Congo Merc is a solitaire, card-driven military combat game that uses a map, counters, and dice. Thematically, it covers the period from 1964 to 1965 in the Congo and Africa, when mercenary forces fought Congolese rebels known as the Simbas. The player controls the mercenaries and the game system runs the Simbas. This is meant to be a historically accurate game. Now let's see how each mission is won. The game is played in missions, and each mission will require you to draw one mission card, such as this one. The card will state the objectives necessary to win. You will be required to do one or two things in each mission. You achieve the recover objective by capturing and moving this number of real objectives back to a friendly base, and inflict at least this number of casualties on the enemy, which is maintained on a KIA track on the game map. If you do not accomplish both of these objectives by the end of the game, you lose. You also lose if the operations track reaches 0 and you have not accomplished the objectives. If there is no KIA requirement for the particular mission, you will lose if you recover the objectives but the KIA track is negative. You can also play all 4 missions as a campaign. You win the campaign only when you have won all of the missions. If you lose any 2 missions in a row, you lose the campaign. Now let's take a look at the components. Congo Merc comes with one 4-page rulebook which has the common rules for every game in the Commando series. It also has 2 pages of scenario rules specific to this game. The front page of the scenario rules provides the rules that vary from the main rulebook specifically for this game, and the back page has optional rules. There are 40 counters. The brown counters are the mercenary units. The green counters are the real objectives and massacre counters. The red counters represent the Congolese rebels, Cubans, and rebel leaders. All ground combat counters represent units at the company level. Also included is a map of the entire country. It's a point-to-point map measuring 17 inches wide by 11 inches high. There are also 4 mission cards, which are actually mini cards measuring a little under 1.5 inches wide by 2.5 inches high. There are also 14 event cards which control the opposition forces. They are labeled event in the upper right corner. All of the cards, including the mission cards, are numbered on the top left for inventory purposes. You will also need 6-sided dice for combat rolls and other determinations. Dice are not included in the game, but 6 are recommended. You can use physical dice or a dice rolling app, which can usually be found at no cost for both Apple and Android devices. Another item needed but not included will be an opaque container where you will place the enemy counters so they can be drawn as dictated by the event cards. Now let's take a closer look at the rulebook. The main 4-page rulebook applies to all games in the Commando series. The 2-page scenario rules provide additional instructions on how to play this particular game. After reading the main rulebook, make sure to carefully read the scenario rules which supersede the main rulebook. For example, there are exceptions to how you handle objectives in the Rebel Leader versus other games in the Commando series. There are also several optional rules that you can implement as you become more familiar with the game. Now let's set up the game so we can start our first mission. First, unfold and lay out the map. Then draw a mission card and place it face up in the play area. Next, shuffle the event cards and place the stack face down. They will be discarded as we go through them throughout the mission. Next, set the dice nearby, and then place all of the red opposition force counters into the draw bin. Now let's take a closer look at the mission card, which will show us how to finish setting up the game. This mission is Race for the Wreckage, where an airplane has gone down containing top-secret intelligence papers. You'll have to fight your way in and get the intel before the Simbas do. For this mission, we'll need to place 1 real objective and 3 massacre counters at random on the map. On the back of each counter is the word objective. You will need to turn over the counters and shuffle them for randomness to conceal their identities. We will then consult the random objective location table and roll 2 dice for each counter to determine where they should be placed on the map. So if we roll a 6 for the first counter, the counter will be placed in the corresponding city, Albertville. Continue rolling 2 dice at a time until all counters are placed. If you roll duplicate numbers, keep rolling since each counter must be placed separately. The next item on the mission card tells you the mission requirements, or what you need to do to win the game. In this mission, we must recover 1 real objective and bring it back to a base while keeping the KIA counter at 0 or higher. Next, the mission card lets you know how many operations you start with, so you can place the ops counter on the 7th square in the operations track. You can also now place the KIA counter on 0 on the KIA track. The KIA counter has a positive and a negative side. If the KIA track reaches 0 and the mercenaries suffer casualties, you must flip the KIA counter over to the negative side and move the counter accordingly on the track. Next, we are given 20 recruit points to select our commando units. Let's take a look at the unit types before we start the recruiting process. Each counter has the name of the unit and a picture, with the firepower number on the left and the movement capability on the right. The basic combat units include the following listed here. Consult the scenario rules for more details on each unit. The opposition forces consist of the following units. The Rebel Leader gives a +1 to the die roll when determining tactical superiority. The Simbas are the Congolese rebels, and the Cubans are the communists who are supporting the rebels. When recruiting units, refer to the Congo Merc recruiting cost table located on the map to see the cost of each unit type. For this mission, we have recruited the following units: 3 commando platoons, 1 heavy weapons unit, 1 airstrike, 2 combat engineers referred to as sappers, and 2 supply column units which are required to transport objectives. This is a total of 20 recruit points. Unless you are playing the optional advanced rules, you cannot save unused recruit points for later. Leaders are not purchased and may only be obtained when assigned by the mission card or through combat results. Now we need to review 2 important terms before we can begin gameplay. The first is force. A force is a group of units in the same space conducting an operation together. A force can consist of 1 or more units, and units in a force must move together, and you cannot pick up or drop off units from a force. A force moves no faster than the slowest unit in that force. The next term is stacking. Stacking is having more than 1 unit in a space. You can have up to 6 land units in a space. Leaders, air units, opposition forces, and objective markers do not count towards the stacking limit. An unlimited number of units may be stacked at a base. Now we have to create our forces from the recruited units. We must place the airstrike counter in the air available box at the bottom left of the map. Force 1 will consist of 2 commando platoons, 1 sappers unit, and 1 supply convoy. Force 2 will have 1 commando platoon, 1 heavy weapons unit, 1 sappers unit, and 1 supply convoy. Finally, the mission card states that we can have 1 leader. Each leader has a name. The leader Charles is airborne qualified and can only be selected initially if there is at least 1 airborne unit recruited. Otherwise, this leader cannot enter play. We will select Mike as a leader and assign him to the first force. Now we are ready to place our forces onto the map. Per the terrain key, there are 2 mercenary bases in Leopoldville and Elizabethville. We will place the airstrike counter in the appropriate box, and we will place Force 1 in Leopoldville and Force 2 in Elizabethville. The remaining mercenary units not currently in play can be placed in the mercenary recruit box or placed to the side. We are now ready to begin play. Now let's see how the game is played. We are going to play through an entire mission until we either win by accomplishing the objectives or lose if all of our units are killed or we run out of operations. Each mission is divided into turns called operations. Only 1 force will conduct 1 operation at a time. An operation has 4 segments: movement, draw an event card, conduct combat if indicated by the event card, and engage an objective if it is encountered by the force. At the end of the turn, we will move the ops counter on the operations track. The game ends if the operations are reduced to 0. The order of segments will be shown in the play area for ongoing reference. This is not a player aid that comes with the game, just a helpful visual while we play through the mission. For our first operation, we will move the first force from Leopoldville 2 spaces toward the closest objective, ending in an airfield city. Next, we draw an event card. The Road Out card states that we can ignore this card if we have a sapper unit, which we do. Otherwise, we would have lost 1 operation. We place the event card onto the discard pile. Since there is no combat and there is no objective involved, the operation is over and the ops marker is moved down 1 space on the ops track. For the next operation, we will move the first force 2 spaces to the closest town with an objective marker. When entering a space with any objective marker, you must stop per the terrain effects chart. For unrevealed objectives, you will be drawing 2 event cards. You will draw 1 upon entering, and then after resolving the first, you will draw a second one and resolve that one. If there are surviving commandos remaining, you will then flip over the objective marker. The first event card drawn is the morale check card. Since the KIA marker is at 0, there is no effect and we can discard it. We are now in the 4th segment of the operation, which is the objective segment, which requires us to draw the second event card. The second event card initiates combat, so we follow the instructions by rolling 1 die. We roll a 3, half of which is 1.5, so we round up to 2. We will draw this number of enemy counters from the draw bin and place them in the space with the commandos. Recall that we have 5 units in our first force. We draw 2 enemy counters with firepower designations of 2 and 1. After we draw the enemy units as directed by the event cards, the first step is to determine tactical superiority. Tactical superiority determines which side fires first in combat. In Congo Merc, combat is not considered simultaneous. so once a unit is eliminated or panics, it does not get a chance to return fire. We then roll one die for each side. Going forward, enemy dice will be colored red, and commando dice will be dark brown to match their corresponding counters. In this case, the enemy rolls a 5 and the commandos roll a 4. However, the commandos have a leader which adds 1 to the die, giving the commandos a 5. A tie roll goes to the commandos unless indicated otherwise on the event card, so the commandos gain tactical superiority during this initial round of combat. Now that we've determined tactical superiority, we can start the first round of battle. We will be consulting the battle results table found on the map. First, line up the enemy forces from highest to lowest firing power. If 2 units have the same firepower, the order does not matter. Next, line up your commando forces in any order you prefer. Fire will alternate between the commandos and the enemy until all units have had a chance to fire, unless they have been eliminated or panicked. Commando units can fire at any enemy during their turn, but the enemy units can only fire at the first commando unit in line. If one side has more units than the other after alternating fire between the opposing forces, that side fires all of its remaining units. If both sides still have units that are not eliminated or panicked, the second round of combat begins, starting with determining tactical superiority. The first commando unit has a firepower of 2, so rolls 2 dice and fires at the first opposition unit, rolling a 5 and a 2. According to the battle results table, a 5 inflicts a panic result on the rebels, so the unit is flipped over to show that it is panicked. Because combat is not simultaneous in Congo Merc, the opposition unit does not get to fire back during this combat segment. The remaining rebel unit only has 1 firepower, so only gets to roll 1 die and must fire at the first commando unit in line. However, according to the terrain effects chart on the map, each enemy unit gets to roll 1 extra die when in a town or airfield town. Since we are currently in an airfield town, the enemy unit gets to roll 2 dice, which result in 1 and a 3, both of which have no effect. The second commando unit in line can fire at either of the units. It fires at the 1 remaining active unit, and it kills it with a roll of 6. It is then the sapper's turn to fire. With a firepower of 1, they can roll 1 die, which results in a 4. This causes a second panic and 2 panic results become a KIA. Since there are no more rebel units, the combat segment ends. You can now move the KIA marker up 1 space for each rebel unit killed. Panicked units do not count as KIA. Recall that the KIA track is reduced by 2 for each commando that is killed in action, and reduced by 1 for each commando unit that becomes panicked. Since we have survived the second event card, we can now flip the objective marker over. Unfortunately, it is not a real objective, but a massacre counter. This counter stays in place during the remainder of the game. Per the terrain effects chart, forces must stop when entering a space with an objective marker unless you have a sappers unit. Because we won the combat segment, we win 1 operation, which would move the ops counter to 7. But since it is the end of the turn, we must also decrease the counter by 1, so we can leave the ops counter where it is at 6. We can now discard the event card. For our next operation, we will move force number 2 towards the objective in Albertville. Since the slowest moving unit in the force has a movement allowance of 2, the force can only move 2 spaces maximum. Next, we draw the event card Friendlies, which states that we can gain 1 op or reveal 1 objective if we have a leader, PSYOP unit, or supply column. Since we do have a supply unit, we elect to reveal the closest objective marker, which happens to be a real objective. By revealing it now, we will not have to draw 2 event cards when we eventually enter the space. Since it is the end of the turn, we move the ops marker to 5, and we can discard the event card. We start the next operation by moving the second force into Albertville with the real objective. We draw the event card Blow Up Stuff for Intel. Since we do have a sapper unit, we can keep the card. Since there is no combat and the objective marker is already revealed, we move the ops counter down to 4. We start the next operation by playing the event card we just received. We elect to make an air move since the starting space has an airfield, and our base in Elizabethville also has an airfield. Since we have the supply column, we can transport the real objective by air to our base airfield. To make the air move, we move the entire force with the real objective to our base. This counts as our entire move for this operation, and we do not have to draw an event card when we land on a base. Recall that the mission card only requires us to recover one real objective and bring it back to a base. In order to successfully conclude the mission, the KIA track must also not be negative. Since the KIA track is currently at 2, the mission was accomplished. If the KIA track had been negative, we would have to have used our remaining operations to attempt to inflict additional casualties on the enemy. If the KIA track was still negative after the operations track reached 0, then the mission would have been unsuccessful. We did not need to use our available airstrike, but if we had, this would have been the procedure for calling in the airstrike. During the Commando combat turn, we would assign the airstrike to any one Commando counter, which adds the airstrike firepower to any one Commando ground unit. The airstrike counter does not directly attack an enemy unit on its own. So in this case, the first ground unit would be able to roll 6 dice instead of just 2. After the airstrike has been used, you would roll 1 die to determine future airstrike availability. If you roll an even number, the airstrike counter is returned to the air available box on the map and would be available again to be used. If an odd number is rolled, the airstrike unit would be placed in the recruit pool box and would not be available for use again. So to recap, let's look at the victory conditions one more time. The mission was won because we recovered one real objective with our supply convoy and returned it to a base, and the KIA track was not negative. If you play this mission as part of a campaign, consult the rulebook to determine how to proceed to the next mission. Here are a few ideas if you want to enhance your gaming experience. If you are playing on a dining room or coffee table, you may want to invest in a game mat. They are relatively inexpensive but make card play much easier, and of course you can use the mats for other card or tile games. You do have to provide your own 6-sided dice or obtain a dice rolling app, many of which are free from Google or Apple. And of course, a good dice tray could come in handy, especially in this game where you may be rolling 6 or more dice at once. This concludes our review of Congo Merc. Visit us at these sites and don't forget to leave a comment on what games you would like to see reviewed and played. And if you would like to undertake your own adventure into the Heart of Darkness, stick around for our disclaimer. Coming up next.